My name's Jessica Niekrasz. I'm the president at Clean Field Partners and the board chair at the Wisconsin Biomass Energy Coalition. Today joining me are Professor Tim Baye and Representative Gary Tauchen. We're here to talk about our legislative effort that is underway from the being hatched from the great mind of Tim, the agricultural, carbon, energy, and water effort. You know what, actually, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves on a more formal basis, give a little background, and then Gary, maybe we launch into, you know, how this all came about.
Okay, my name's Gary Tauchen. I've been in the Wisconsin legislature for the last 15 years. This is going to be my last term, and I've had the opportunity to work with Tim Baye and Jessica and Bob Welch on several projects over the course of the last year. And even though this is my last term, I thought you can do something significant or not. And so about a year ago, the four of us started pulling people together in order to develop this initiative. And initially we called it just the digester project because it was simple to say, but now we have an official name, the Wisconsin Agriculture Carbon, Energy, and Water Initiative. And when you're talking about the quality of our environment, we need to make sure that we do a good job. And we know that something is going to happen, and we want to be involved and not just take what's given to us. So we put this group together. The four of us are kind of like the executive committee, but because I'm only going to be there another year, I wanted to make sure we had enough support in the legislature. So we have the chairs of agriculture in both the Assembly and the Senate, the chairs of natural resources in the Assembly and the Senate, the chair of the environment, and the chair of energy and utilities. So it covers the issues that we're involved in here. And we aren't trying to do it ourselves. We have a public-private partnership where we pulled in industry leaders. We have 20 people on a steering committee. We have 5 working groups dealing with carbon, water, and energy, all industry professionals. And we wanted to make sure we had enough. So each of those working groups has between 5 and 10 people. We want to make sure that we get the information out there. This email or website at the end, we have had all the working groups tape their programs so that if people are interested, you can copy that down and go to that website and watch the videos of the presentations that we've given in the past. And I think that would be very helpful. But the Wisconsin Biomass Energy Coalition has really stepped forward and helped us develop the program for that. And I just want to compliment, I had some health problems this last year, and my aides at the Capitol and these people that I've been working with have been able to keep everything moving forward without missing a beat. So I really appreciate that. So we did put out a request for comment, similar to the Public Service Commission, the PSC dockets, for 60 days to get as much information from those people that were interested in what we were doing as we could. And we had 18 significant responses. The PSC and the Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection both provided input, and Renew, and a lot of other organizations, whether it was individuals that farm and have digesters, or people that put up digesters. But we got a lot of good input, and we worked to develop draft legislation. Last Friday, we finally got a draft of a piece of legislation, And Tuesday morning, I had these folks along with the 6 legislators in the room, and we went through that draft legislation and redid it. So we're on draft 2 now. And to me, it looks good. I think Tim's all happy with it. And but I've got to check with the rest of the legislators to make sure they're happy with it. I'm hoping that we can have a hearing and get the foundation built. We need the Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection and the PSC to help us in a lot of different areas. And I think Tim's going to be talking about that, but we're really interested in trying to make a difference. And it's a really comprehensive project. It might, I'm not expecting that we're going to finish it anytime soon, but I'm willing to come down here and work on special projects that I think are important to agriculture in the state of Wisconsin. And so we're gonna continue to work on this project along with a few others. I just don't need a full-time job anymore. And this is one of the things that really tripped my trigger. So I'm looking forward to at least getting the foundation built this spring, but we're going to need more coming next session. And that's why we have so many people that are involved in this project, because it really is important. We had our coming out party, I guess you'd call it, last week at Dairy Strong, and introduced what we were doing. And this is the second presentation we've made together, trying to explain what we're doing and where we're going with it. And so I'm going to turn it back to Jessica, and she can introduce Tim.
A man who needs no introduction.
I'm a professor. Give me 5 minutes, I'll give you 40.
Well, then,
Yeah.
the floor is yours.
Thank
Fine,
you.
sir.
Can everybody hear me back there? Fine. All right. I'm Tim Baye. I'm a professor of energy finance and the state energy specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Gary and I haven't been working together for a year. We've been working together his entire duration in Madison. And he turned to me late in 2020 and said, I want to shoot for the moon. Can you give me a program where we can really move the needle? I worked on my first renewable energy project in 1984. I knew how to operate a spreadsheet, and that made me a real valuable commodity at the engineering firm I was working for. I've spent just about my entire career translating policy into finance. And this is really my first foray into the policy world from the development side. So I bring with it that prism, is that it's the fundamentals. It's the components of a project or series of projects that policy often defines the rules of the game. And how do you translate those rules in the game so that the host, the sponsor, the investor benefits and keeping within the spirit of the policy? If I were to ask any one of you what your definition of sustainability in agriculture is, I'd probably get a different answer from each and every one of you, but there'd be a lot of commonality. If the intention and the objective in a market-based system is to create policy that provides structure and clarity on how markets work, you need a couple of things. One, you got to have pricing. Two, you got to have a means of producing what you're going to sell into that sustainability market. And third, you got to have clear rules. Clear, concise, transparent rules that everybody who wants to participate in the market can understand. Now, from my perspective, after 38 years in this industry, I'm old. There's a sea change. The sea change has just started to happen. I put a timeline of around 30 months. ago. What happened? My perspective, what happened is renewable energy projects to that point have been bolt-on projects, one-off projects. We added in, but rarely is the concept of managing carbon or managing environmental impact been a core part of the business. It's always been an add-on. It's a compliance issue. What has happened is something called ESG, environmental, societal, and governance reporting. And the expectation at the corporate and institutional level to submitting these reports. Now, in the beginning, is probably a fair criticism that this kind of ESG reporting was a bit of greenwashing. We got to appeal to a certain audience, all right? But that's changed fundamentally in the last couple of years. Why? Well, stakeholders, shareholder initiatives have changed corporate environment. Secondly, stock market and capital markets started paying attention to these ESG reports and building them into their credit analysis of the institutions. So it has a dramatic impact and effect on the cost of capital. Thirdly, it's been a hodgepodge of disclosure and reporting. While there are international standards, they're called GHG protocols. There are standards, they're broad, they're high-level standards. And each and every company that develops these ESG reports has their own carbon accounting system that they impose on their supply chain. I'll go into a little bit on that with the slides. So how does that affect farming? Well, some of the biggest multinational corporations that file these reports are food companies. And they are beginning to get significant pressure from Chase and Citibank and Credit Suisse saying you must disclose accurately how you calculate your ESG reports or your environmental footprint. On top of that, in September, the Securities and Exchange Commission opened up an investigation on ESG and how firms comply and how they collect information and how they report that information. And that information is due, that report investigation is due end of the second quarter of this year. That process will probably be the biggest game changer. So come back to the question, how does that affect farming in Wisconsin? It's no secret that animal agriculture has had a target on its back. Really none. It's no secret to animal ag. It's no secret to other stakeholders that there's room for improvement. But if you're going to ask for improvement and do it in a market-based system, it also has to cash flow. There has to be a motive and a return on investment. And that's what this whole policy package is about, is providing structure, metrics, and tools. I'll say that again. It's about providing structure to the sustainability market, establishing a state-sanctioned system of metrics, and enhancing the toolkit so that the farmers can look at managing their carbon and understand these are my options. All right, we call it AQ. Advancing, maybe not. Oh, that's the pointer. It's not advancing. Can you advance it?
We can't let this slow us down.
I once gave a presentation to the power conference. That's 5,000 people and had the entire AV system go down 30 seconds into the presentation. Talk about a dog and pony for that thing.
Oh.
Ooh, that's me. I turned it off and on. Okay, well, I got the pointer. Are we good?
You know,
Oh, there we go. Oh, I didn't do that.
I did that with my mind.
All right, I'll go on. We'll catch up. Oh, there we go. Oh, hey, I did that.
We have a winner.
I did. Cool. Okay, fundamental question. Do markets reflect enough for this in the sustainability space for the government to pay attention to? Gary said yes, so we proceeded. GHG, you got 3 different scopes that go under your general accounting. Scope 1, direct emissions coming from your operations. Scope 2, what's the carbon footprint of the energy you buy? Scope 3, what's the carbon footprint of the inputs you buy from your supply chain? What goes into what are the drivers behind that? So ESG is the principal one for this program in particular. Shareholder initiatives influence that process, but so do the values of the farms themselves, the families and the people who own the farms. They have values and initiatives as well. It may happen at a kitchen table. Government regulations, debt and equity. Doesn't take much of a literature search in this area to find out that ESG funds, companies who are in full compliance with not just the scope, but also the spirit of ESG are all outperforming others in their industry sectors. Who are the players? This is just a snapshot, folks, but it's a snapshot of internationally known brands. On the farm, what are we looking at? Well, we got basically 4 areas. We've got feed and production practices, which are land use. We've got manure handling and nutrient management, cow care and efficiency, and on-farm energy systems. We're going to focus primarily on the on-farm energy systems aspects of this, but I'm going to spend just a little time on carbon accounting as well. So what's the effective role in the straight? First, this is anybody in here is familiar with the state legislature, you know that both houses are controlled by the Republicans. Okay, the focus is on markets and a voluntary system. This is about voluntary. The only things that aren't voluntary in this affect the PSC and the utilities to a degree. Establish markets, establish standards and transparency. And you read through any of the literature, if you're involved in this business at all, I am on a private level as well. It's all about standards and transparency. It's being able to track claims that are made that you're reducing your carbon footprint back to the point of origin in your supply chain. Reduce costs and complexity. To participate in these markets, we're really not going to talk a whole lot about soil carbon sequestration in this program, okay? But if you're in a farming business and you get approached by a company like Indigo Ag with a contract about soil carbon, right? It is complex and there's a fair amount of cost for a fairly low return. We're not ignoring that. We built it into the program. But what we wanted to do overall is reduce the barriers to participate in this carbon economy. Enhance the toolkits and improve the science. Here's a capstone. Left-hand corner, conventional ag. Here are the 4 components. 1, voluntary carbon accounting system administered by the state. We were hoping to have that as a voluntary tax schedule. There's been some revisions in the bill draft. We'll see where we land with this. It may ending up with a different agency. Enhanced access to on-farm energy or reduced carbon energy provided by the utility. Nutrient management, specifically in the area of biogas. Providing a virtual marketplace so that like-minded farming operations can find other like-minded farming operations and sell livestock, inputs, services, etc. And then eventually a carbon labeling system, so that the operation ends up with a diversified income stream, not just a commodity based on milk prices, but has opportunities for multitudes. So here's our toolkit: carbon accounting, on-farm energy, biogas, nutrient, carbon offsets, and carbon labeling. Carbon accounting. The original intent, we'll see what happens through the committee hearings, but was to provide a voluntary tax schedule that takes the core of all the existing carbon accounting systems that are out there right now. There are many. Embodies them into one tax form that then the farm can file online, on paper, and it comes back with a front-facing report that is proprietary to the farm. It will show where the carbon centers are in their operation. If they're using anhydrous, it'll pop out. If they're using their own manure, it'll pop out. If they're buying their power from wheat, it pops out. If they're using propane, it pops out. And then they have their own management information system that is proprietary. Then they can look to their processors, and the processors who are buying their milk, and said, okay, they set a premium schedule, or they're demanding compliance from me. Do I meet that benchmark or do I not? And they get guidance back directly from the system on how to manage their operations. Here's the common components of a carbon offset, a carbon accounting system. The herd profile, the milk and beef production, their energy sources, etc. Most of this information, by the way, is already available from existing information systems that they have. Those are fairly sophisticated operations, even at the grass-fed level, that you only have 30 or 40 head of cattle. You still have good information. So how do we work it? Well, the first thing is, this is just a spreadsheet. These are my options. These are all my investment options. Here's my savings, my revenue, my capital expense, my operating expense, my cash flow, the investment tax credit, etc. For any option a farmer is going to pursue, they're going to first run the numbers. Does it pencil out? Does it make sense for me to put solar on my milking parlor? Then if I do that on a financial basis, the second question is, if I just put panels on my milking parlor, let's say that I reduce my power buy from my utility by 40% over a year. Then I have a carbon-free source on that 40%. I still buy 60%, but my carbon footprint just went down by 40%. This is the other critical part of the role that the government will play, is in making these determinations and standards. USDA is already doing a fair amount of this. California, which is quite advanced in experimentation with these types of systems, already has these databases and capabilities. We can draw from others. We don't have to create it on our own. All right, to this audience's interests. This is just an illustration. It's an advanced one, but it's of a microgrid on a farm. All right, I got a solar array. During the sun, I serve my load. Everything is managed by a data management and an energy system, energy management system. You can't optimize otherwise. I've got storage. My power goes to my storage, follows the load, the non-sun hours. Okay. If I've got excess, I get an order from the grid, they take it. If there's grid instability, or based on my PPA, which we'll get to, based on my PPA, I get a market authorization. Immediately, that market authorization goes to my on-site power system. It curtails power someplace in my system. I do some demand shifting or some load management, and I've got storage that goes now to that grid order. Right? That's a microgrid. That's an optimized microgrid. But there's this little rule promulgated in September of 2020 by FERC, 2222. And it was in September of 2020. What does FERC do? FERC says levelize the playing field for these so that these distributed energy resources have equal access to the wholesale markets as the utilities do. Second thing that FERC 2222 does is it allows for these systems to be aggregated and operated as one. Two fundamental things. Levelizes the playing field, the market playing field, to allow distributed generation to participate in wholesale markets, which means the wholesale power, capacity, ancillary services. Second thing it allows to do is to aggregate. Well, who's the natural aggregator? It's going to be the utilities. Okay, they're already there. All right. So I'm not utility bashing here. That's what the FERC order does. So what we've asked for is that we have asked in this package that every PPA in the state look like the same PPA in the state, that they be standardized, that they look just like an auto purchase agreement or a real estate purchase agreement, that the topics of net metering, buyback rates, excess generation, parallel generation, allocation of proceeds, because what happens in most cases is when you have a distributed generation facility that's grid tied, your power goes to the utility. All of the power, all the electrons go to the utility, and you buy back power from the grid to serve your load. So if you have a system that's generating excess energy, utility gets it pretty much for free, okay, depending on your net metering arrangement. What we're asking for is that those things be included in the contract. They may not be enumerated. They're not about the specific, thou shalt pay this rate or thou shalt have this limit on net metering, but that the topics are addressed in contracts so that the farm operations know the same topics that the utility does, that everything is transparent and clear. Biogas. I said I worked in California. One big lesson I took away from that experience in California was that the role of the state and how the California biogas system had evolved over time. Originally, it was just very large farming operations who could afford, had the money to install digester systems that were close to a pipeline. Those were the ones that were benefiting from the system. California PUC, CARB, and California Department of Food and Agriculture recognized that the system was significantly limited by the infrastructure of the gas system in the state. So they provided financing incentives to the two main interstate gas carriers to expand the gas lines into the dairy regions. Then they modified the easement right-of-way and permitting process to install gas collection systems, which is basically PVC of 6 inches and going along roadways. It's not that complicated, but they streamlined the process. The developers then have the responsibility of developing the last mile. Okay, the spoken wheel, the gas collection system. Well, that was the takeaway. What it did is allowed for a lot smaller dairy operations to participate in the system. They didn't have to be all very large CAFOs. They could be much smaller, and they were developed in terms of clusters. So what this program is asking Wisconsin to do is to develop a master plan for pipeline expansion to collect biogas through the state. And then to do similarly, what we're asking in the power sector is to develop standardized agreements between the developer, the farm, and the pipelines, so that every deal looks the same in terms of the contracting. They'll still negotiate, every deal is different based upon the site characteristics, but at least the terms of the agreements will be standardized. Why? Why do we want standardized on both sides? Because local banks, developers, and hosts will all benefit in a standardized program because the money people will understand these projects much better. Streamline the system, improve what we call deal flow. In theory, this is how, no, actually not in theory, this is how it works. Is the raw biogas is collected to a central treatment facility, and at that central treatment facility, it's inserted into the pipeline. That's how clusters work. All right, so as Gary said, he recruited 6 committee chairs to sign the letter that released the request for comment that was out for 60 days. And as a result, the bill draft second version has already been revised. Gary suggests that as soon as the end of next week, there may be a committee hearing or 2 committees, 2 or more, at least 1, possibly 2 or more, and that this piece of legislation will be fully considered, and hopefully part of it, maybe all of it's too much to ask for, but at least some core components of this will be launched. And the state of Wisconsin might end up being one of the first states in the union to have a state-sponsored and sanctioned carbon accounting system. Questions?
Yeah. What is the penalty if a farmer doesn't want to participate in calculating their carbon footprint?
Well, the penalty is what their buyers will assess. Okay, so we don't have carbon taxes, nor do we have carbon regulations in the United States or this state. So really the penalty is at the processor level. Some processors, a few, are developing premium schedules. Most of them are saying thou shalt, if you want to continue selling your milk to us, you will comply with this data requests. So it's a compliance. They may lose the market. They may lose their market.
I just have a follow-up question, and I think I asked this a few months ago, but it didn't work out. Who does the auditing of these reports that are submitted to make sure that they're accurate or considered?
Well, that's a good question. It depends. Jeff just said, who does the auditing on these? All right, so there's 3 parts, 3 responses to that. If you were enrolled in a carbon offset program by some of the marketers, I used Indigo Ag, so I'll use them again. You have to pay for, or Indigo Ag has to pay for third-party verification. So there has to be a physical visit to the site to see that you did go from conventional tillage to no-till, and you put a cover crop on. If you are participating in a corporate carbon accounting system for compliance, there's 2 ways. One, that the buyer may impose those costs upon you. The other route, and that's what this policy package is about, was by using the state tax code, it enabled self-verification. Why? Because it's against the law to falsify information in a tax filing. So the presumption of accuracy of the information exists. It's considered an a priori, I guess the Latin term, is it's a function. If you provide information in a tax form, it's considered to be accurate. And our next step, once the legislation is passed, is to convene a 2-day workshop with some of those companies that were on the screen earlier, and to get their feedback into the design of the tax, of the information system. the assumption is if we can get 80 or 90% to their level, then we have dramatically reduced the cost and the obstacles for farms to participate. Because it's just a couple of extra hours of accounting time when they file their taxes. And the presumption is that the information will be accurate, one, and proprietary or private, two, that the farm owns it. And it is under no obligation to share that information until they voluntarily decide to do so.
Tim, can we talk a little bit about what the farm's experience is, what how the credits work, how the generation of the credits work, and
That's a really good point. So this isn't about carbon credits or carbon offsets. It's about carbon footprint, which is how much carbon went into the production of your product, of your 100-weight of milk, or your bale of hay, or your bushel of grain, or your beef carcass. Carbon credit is what's generated by a change in practice or an activity. If you switch from your current utility service to 100% renewable, you have a reduction in your carbon footprint. Can you get a credit for that? Well, now we open up a can of worms because they were dealing with renewable energy credits or RECs. But on the flip side, on the gas side, you can earn a credit, but you're talking about a completely different regulatory regime that's dictated by two parties, the feds and the states. In the feds, we have what's called Renewable Fuel Standard, RINs. That's what the ethanol subsidy is, so to speak. Biogas, for any of you who don't know what biogas earns in the marketplace right now, if you can produce manure-produced biogas, and you can find a way to clean that up and put it on the pipeline and have an offtake agreement with a California diesel fleet operator who's converted their engines from diesel to CNG, you can earn somewhere between the gas value. As a farmer, you're not going to earn it all. There are lots of middle people that get their own shit too. Okay, they get a cut. But the pricing is somewhere between $65 and $80 a decatherm, of which the heating value of the gas, about $3.50, maybe $4. All the rest of it is incentives. Payback period for a digester that has that kind of market opportunity, but 1.5 years. Yeah. 1.5 years. But what if we don't have that? Okay. Who gets all those credits? If I'm selling credits, if I'm producing power and I'm selling to my utility and I don't know better, they keep all the credits. If I'm selling my biogas to a buyer and they keep it all and it goes to California, all my carbon reduction is not reflected in my carbon footprint because I can't double count. If I'm selling them, the utility takes them, I can't claim those credits. If I'm selling them and the fuel distributor gets them, I can't keep those credits. In our case, what we want to make certain is how those credits are treated in the contracts. It is clear. Because if I'm a farm and I want to be managing my carbon footprint, I got to know the difference. Because if I go right, my carbon footprint is going to be X. And if I go left, my carbon footprint, because now I own them and I can retire them, will be less than X. And we want to make it clear to the farms which direction they can go and to support the decision making. Yeah.
Yep. Well,
Go ahead, Gary.
what I wanted to add was that we're trying to figure out, it doesn't pay to do any of this unless it's profitable for each farm. So we're planning on meeting with an organization that deals in software with the agricultural community crop consultants to work on developing a software package where they can push in some numbers and get results and then decide one way or the other if they want to voluntarily participate or not. And so we have, we've been working on it a year and we're still not there. So it's a huge project, but you have to start somewhere. And I think we're going to get some decent results in the end.
Can I?
The question, in your vision here, you talked about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. The farm is a scope 3 source of their buyers' carbon chain. How do you see, in Wisconsin farms, they purchase feed or whatever from other suppliers. In your vision, how does this sort of go down to that next layer, the scope 3 of the farm?
So USDA has a system called Comet. All right. And Comet's been around for a while. It's developed at Colorado State University. But it's got some significant limitations, and that's one of them. It takes national averages. So when we get to this point, as Gary said, there are two things here, especially in the carbon accounting. We convene the corporate entities and say, okay, show us your carbon accounting systems collectively. And we look at the third-party vendors who are already collecting that information. The areas that we will be able to improve incrementally over time is those topics. Is if I buy my grain from my neighbor next door, and they are conventional tillage, conventional operation, we've been doing it forever. And if I've got a premium schedule in front of me from Nestle, says if I reduce my carbon footprint, I get a $100 incentive waiting for me. I'm either going to turn to my neighbor and said, hey, I'll split the deal with you. You do start doing carbon management and let me do my own scope 3 accounting. Or I'm going to go in the DATCAP database on the marketplace at DATCAP that says, and find a different grain producer 2 miles away who is willing to manage their carbon. This isn't a silver bullet. As Gary said before, it's a framework of fundamentals that will allow improvement over time. Is if we can get something that's transparent and is considered to be valid, verifiable by the marketplace, then we encourage more farms to be involved.
We're just about at time, but there's one more really interesting question from our online attendees, which is where can we follow the updates on this initiative?
The Wisconsin Biomass Coalition has a website, and we earlier, I don't know if Tim wants to put that up there again, but follow that website, and we tape as many programs as we can. We taped all the working group programs, and so if there are others like they're here today taping us, so there'll be programs out there, but we'll keep everybody up to speed with what's happening, and hopefully within a couple of weeks we'll have a bill that we can vote on. As I said, it's foundational. It's not everything that we want, but if we go for the whole enchilada, I know we'll get nothing. And so we're going to get what we can. We're almost at the end of session. We'll be done in session by the 10th of March. So so our time frame is very tight, but it took this long because we didn't want to go at the speed of light. We wanted to go very methodically to make sure that we weren't getting ahead of everybody, and everybody that was interested had an opportunity to provide input to us. So
Yeah. The website is wibiomass.org.
Other questions you can follow up.
Yeah. Any of those following online questions, we'll be sure to post those. All right. Thank you so much for attending.
thank you.